reading it wrong or understand it wrong? Is it because I'm applying it wrong? Is it because I'm failing that test of faith? Or is it because I don't know what it's saying that we rejoice, we have count all joy because we know, but maybe I don't actually know what I'm supposed to know. So let's have a look at it together. Anybody else understand what I'm talking about?
Yes, absolutely.
This word trials is, it can also be translated as temptations. The original word is in some Bible translations, it talks about temptations and others trials. And either way, if it's a temptation, it's something that entices you from faith. It entices you to sin, temptation. And the theologians talk about these temptations or these trials as afflictions, as troubles, as things that cause sorrow. They're quite deep things. But can I begin by saying this? I am not saying that the trials should be fun. The Bible does not say that. It doesn't say, oh, this is going to be fantastic. I'm going through an adversity in my life. In fact, when Jesus taught us to pray, he used the same word, temptation. And he said, this is how you should pray. God, do not lead us into these things. Lead us not into temptation. So Jesus is saying we should ask God not to lead us in there. But if we find ourselves there, we should consider it pure joy. Lead us not into temptation. Peter, he says this in 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 6. He says, in all this stuff you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Other translations say instead of suffer grief, be distressed. That there's a heaviness, a burden of these trials or temptations. It's no wonder you don't see people celebrating. I don't know what your situations are or what you've gone through. I know for myself, I've had periods of these things. Sometimes the temptation, sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they're larger, sometimes they're these trials that you need to persevere through. I remember one time, many years ago now, I was standing in front of a cash machine in London, put my card in, it said, insufficient funds. I didn't have enough money in my bank account, so I got my credit card out. I had a credit card, put the credit card in, and it said, you're over your limit. I forget the words it said, but it's essentially, we can't give you any money. You've already taken out more than your limit. I opened my wallet. There was no money in there. The moth could have flown out of it. I was behind, I think at that stage, about a month and a half behind on my rent, to pay rent. I had begun my own business, and at that stage I did not have a client or an invoice in which I was going to get paid. So I had no job. It's not like at the end of the week money's going to come in. There was nothing coming in and no sight of anything coming in. The government wasn't going to give me any money because I hadn't asked them for anything. My family wasn't in the country. I mean, I've been through a trial like that. Financial trial. I've had a year where in this 1 year, well, Debbie and I, we had three close members of our family die, including Debbie's dad, in this year. And the same year, the doctors told us we couldn't have children. Then I started failing in my job. I was in my dream job. I started failing. It was ministry. And from that failure, I started entering into a burnout which lasted, I can't even remember now, I think around 18 months, maybe 2 years. Yeah, 2004 was a shocker. 2014 wasn't great either, I've got to say. 2014, both my dad and Debbie's mum were both fighting for their life and both lost that fight. They both died. One of them was in a really terrible situation, it's really awful circumstances. And then there's 2022, this year. And this year, I've described it, it feels to me like a perfect storm. It feels like there's so many challenges, so many situations that have caused hurt or frustration or disappointment or discouragement or disillusionment or this, I could go on. There's just been one thing after the other, but I say after the other, but it's really happening all at the same time. And this year's been a shocker. I'm saying this because I'm guessing that some people can relate to having difficult times. And then I consider the days that they were in when James actually wrote that scripture. When James wrote that, the Christians were being fed to the lions for entertainment. And they were given a choice. Either tell us that you don't believe in Jesus and you can live happily ever after. Or, if you still say that you believe in Jesus, you face torture, really a torturous death. And they had to decide, what are they going to do with that?